silence all around. Blind, if they get the chance, they were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not puppy drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this stand. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you've never run before. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast. It's myself, John Anderson, at the helm tonight. I am, of course, joined by partner in crime, Craig Manson. Hello, Craig. Good evening.
Good evening. How are we doing?
Oh, not too bad, mate. Not too bad, considering. We are obviously here tonight. Well, I shouldn't imagine it'll be a normal episode. Let's be honest, but we'll do our best, and we'll get through. We'll cover the sad news at the weekend, obviously. Spend a bit of time on that, and then we'll see. Obviously, rugby. At times like this, rugby tends not. It doesn't matter too much, but we'll touch on the URC games as well when we get a chance. Those of you who's joining us. Obviously, we'll do the quick plug. If you want to come over to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, you can get access to our Hands in the Ruck section after this. You can also get some exclusive content on there as well. Not going to labour that point tonight because, there's much more important things to talk about. So we'll get straight into the news. Obviously, Saturday it reached us that Doddie Weir lost his fight with MND after 6 years, age 52. Having campaigned tirelessly since 2016, raised over £8 million for his foundation, the My Doddie 5 Foundation. I mean, our group chat, Craig, was there was kind of to-ins and fro-ins, and I kind of was quite checked out of it at the time, but no surprise what the tone was like when the news came through.
Yeah, the problem the big problem we have is that although we were fairly prepared for it, it came as a bit of a shock just because of getting to see him come down to Murrayfield for the New Zealand game. You obviously saw a huge difference in him when he came to the New Zealand game, but it didn't prepare you for such a quick loss after that. And obviously, first things first, our thoughts go out to all of his family and his friends that have lost a large part of their life. Never mind the rugby community who have lost a large part of our great team of rugby fans. It's quite something, to have this, to have this giant of a man taken from us, even though we were kind of prepared for it. It still doesn't what's the word? Doesn't prepare you for it.
No, you're absolutely right, and it is one of those ones, isn't it? It's a strange one because you've got that there is that inevitability of it, and given the prognosis, 6 years is a massive fight. And you're absolutely right to see him make it back onto Murrayfield for the New Zealand game was incredible, and to see his family around him and the outpouring from, obviously the statement from the family was beautifully well written, and as you rightly say, Craig, our absolute thoughts go out to them at this time, but the outpouring of emotion from the world of rugby itself and beyond, actually, it shows the impact Doddie's had over this time, and how, you could say all that money raised for charity, but ultimately it was his personality. He was a force of nature that just drove every day to do what he could.
Yeah, and there's two sides to it, obviously. There's Doddie Weir, the rugby player, stroke rugby pundit, etc. And then there's Doddie Weir, the MND campaigner and sufferer. To deal with the first one, you've got a gentleman there who I was very, very lucky to spend a very, very small amount of time with him. But he made you feel special. He was interested to talk about you and what you're doing, and he also just talked to you like a normal person. Whereas a lot of people who I've met a few MPs and people like that who will talk to you, but you're not talking to them. They're going through their process to shake hands and move on. And with Doddie, he was interested in finding out a funny story from you, because he was always there ready for the funny stories from him, and also although he mentioned it at the Sports Personality Awards, the BBC Sports Personality Awards, one of the only trophies he ever held, being a Scottish rugby player from the 90s, but he was just. I'm here now. I got cut off there for a second.
Yeah, you had me panicked there. I thought I was going to have to monologue there for a second, Craig. Yeah, he did have a desperately wicked sense of humour as well, and things like he was always up for a laugh and a joke, and you saw that throughout his career, throughout his illness as well. That never wavered, and it's so endearing to see. Shall we? Let's work from Doddie Weir as a rugby player. You've talked about that, and an interesting career, because obviously he spanned the amateur and the change to professionalism. Second row, famously described, what was it, the Mad Giraffe or something to that extent, wasn't it?
Yeah, I heard it today, actually. I was listening to the I know we don't tend to mention other podcasts on here, but I was listening to the BBC Scotland the rugby podcast, and that was a fabulous listen. And I think it was Bill McLaren was describing him as the running like a mad giraffe. I think it was. Yeah, you're right.
That's right. Which again, inimitable commentary from Bill McLaren. But played his career at Melrose. Melrose, wasn't
yes,
it? Yes, I've
Melrose,
got that right.
and then in the he was one of Telfer's players. He was one that Jim Telfer brought through Melrose.
And won the title at Melrose in 1990, I believe, as well. Which was that picture, and then played at Newcastle in the down south as well, and obviously, a very successful club career, but also got the opportunity to go and represent the Lions famously, and we'll all remember the infamous scene on the Lions tour with the press officers and the management and the mistaken identity. It's interesting, isn't it? When you see footage like that, you get to see he was truly a person that, you do think he would have been happier with a pint in hand and just playing a game he loved than the professionalism aspect of it. But, he was well known as being he took his rugby very seriously as well.
Yeah, lots and lots of coaches and players that have played with him and coached him have been talking about him quite a lot over the last week, and all very complimentary. He was a second row who originally at 19 years old when he started playing senior rugby was 14 stone.
Wow.
At 6'7", I think he was, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And he originally, funnily, Jim Telfer was just talking about. I was listening to the BBC Scotland thing again, and he was saying that he started him at number 8 because his dad didn't want him to play second row, and he was, everyone who's talked about him has said that he was athletic around the park, one of the new age second rows who would be quick around the park and very hard to deal with compared to the big lumps that were second rows at that time and sometimes still are.
Well, absolutely right, and it is interesting to think about him in that sense of being, it was around that time where we transitioned from that amateur era into professionalism. The typical body type and role of players did change, and seeing a very talented rugby player like Doddie Weir playing in the forwards and playing second row, it has set the archetype, as you say. You do still get those lumbering big brutes of a second row, but there is a place now for the ball playing quick around the park, the Mad Giraffe, if you will, and I think we see that. It's interesting seeing the influence of guys like that through Scottish rugby as well, because we have players in the current squad who, they're not Doddie Weir, but the style of play, you can pick out elements of it and see that coming through. So it's very interesting. So the Lions thing, obviously we've covered the Lions tour before, and the what a character he was on that. But obviously, seeing his Lions tour get cut short in the way it did, was really disappointing and really sad. And even for a man like him, it was hard to deal with.
Yeah, and it's well documented that most of the rugby community, if have watched the Living with the Lions DVD and video at that time, and have watched the usual jokes, etc., that are going on, but also have watched the heartbreak of him sitting in with Dr. James Robson, being told that he's no longer going to play in the Lions and he's going home. And I think all of us that have played rugby, know that feeling of being told you're done for the day. That's you, and I you can only amplify it by probably 5 or 6 million to be at the pinnacle of your rugby career and have it cut short by just sheer brutality, and someone being, going back to the days of people who were out to hurt someone, to take them out of the tour so that they don't have to play against them. It was just horrendous. And we can all talk about whether he would play with Martin Johnson and be a Test player. I'm sure he would have been, and that's the point,
And then you reflect on the 61 caps for Scotland as well, in an era where, generally we've seen a couple of centurions since then, but generally caps you didn't tend to get 61 caps. That was, a mark of how long he had been in that squad. And certainly as a youngster, remember Doddie Weir was one of the standouts in those kind of teams in that sort of, for me, that mid 90s period where, you would see his name in the squad and he was always one you would look out for and watch out for, which, probably again is that entertainment factor of wanting good players to play rugby and seeing them. But 61 caps for Scotland, I mean, that's no mean feat in that era, and well deserved. What was your? Do you obviously? You're sorry to spoiler alert for everyone. Craig's slightly older than me. What's your early memories of Doddie Weir in a Scotland jersey?
I think for me, I think because we went through the period of you didn't jump in the line out, and then you jumped in the line out.
Yeah. And
for me, I think that my biggest memory of Doddie Weir, apart from his 2 tries against New Zealand, was seeing how high he would go and be lifted in the line out, and how I was playing I've always played tight head prop at that time, and I remember talking to a hooker that played with me and saying that I wouldn't fancy having to try and get the ball over the top of him if he was defending the line out, and I think that was this guy who obviously him because of all the joking and the fun and this, that, and the other, but just someone who could switch it on, and he would be sailing up in that line out and taking that ball out of the sky, and know you knew it was a safe pair of hands, So that was, I think, just the height, the line outs were mine, just because he being a typical forward, I like my set piece.
I love a line out. Oh, yeah. And obviously, Doddie left Newcastle in his club career and finished his career back in the Borders at the Border Reivers, as they were at the time. He went on to have, now again, you remember him from his playing career, but obviously his work, particularly around the Melrose Sevens and the commentary, and seeing the just tartan suits is all you can describe it as. Some of the most insane fashion choices you've ever seen, and again, just pure energy and pure happiness from him. Some of these commentaries at Melrose are legendary.
Yeah, I kind of had a little time away from the game, and missed a lot of the Melrose Sevens that he commentated at, and I was usually working on the weekends, so never got the chance to watch. So I that tends to be less of my memory of Doddie, but the one thing you always were guaranteed if you did catch up with it, is you'd see him somewhere in the Melrose crowd with the most Haufen suit on you've ever seen in your entire life. But you know what? at 6'7" and in a hyphen suit, you knew exactly who it was. That's for sure.
There was some absolute shockers over the years, and it was one of those ones. I don't think I ever thought of dabbling in the tartan trousers, tartan suit like escapades. But if I had ever thought to myself, I could pull that off, not a chance. I think you have to be 6'7" and have a personality to match to be able to pull off the tartan shoes like Doddie did.
Aye, absolutely. I've got a pair of tartan trousers, but they're certainly, mind you, there's a big enough arse in them, but I certainly don't know if I could go with a whole three-piece tartan outfit.
Maybe there's an opportunity for you to try that out, Craig, at some point, and we'll
you never know.
Do a fashion show.
We'll have a live event where I'll turn up and I'll get all the tweed manufacturers in the borders to make me one.
That's it. Well, if there's any tartan suit makers listening tonight or listening,
have a surplus.
Have a wee surplus, yeah. There you go. Maybe for charity, me and Craig will do a tartan suit catwalk for you. So if that's of interest to you, get in contact with the podcast. Can't believe what I'm just trying to sign us up to, Craig.
I noticed you were doing the talking there. I had nothing to do with it there.
Oh, mate, I can talk you into anything. Don't you worry.
And have.
Yes. And have. Yes. On, too many occasions now. So the other thing that we'll come on to the MND stuff in just a minute, obviously, because it has played. It's almost it feels in some way like it's a life of not two halves, but a life of there's a definite split point, and almost the pre-motor neuron disease. Doddie Weir was also very, very active after his retirement from rugby on the after dinner speaker circuit, and did you ever get a chance to see any of his after dinner work, Craig?
I was never at a dinner with him, but I was at one of his book. Well, it wasn't a book reading, but it was his book tour, and we had an evening with him, and he also came up to the How of Fife. Our good friend Ali Murray organised an event out at the Old Course Hotel, and he was up with both him and Stuart Barton, one of the Scotland and British Irish Lions physios, did an afternoon speaking event for the How of Fife. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it that night, so I never got to hear him. But the event in St Andrews that I went to was fantastic, and we actually. Well, again, it was the chat. He talked about everything. He talked about a mixture of his playing days, how rucks were proper rucks in those days. When if Jeremy Guscott fell on the floor in front of you, you got a chance to give him a shoeing, and just But again, I go back to this whole thing of, I met him afterwards, and he was in, there was obviously a few people wanting to talk to him, and he invested in every single person that came up and talked to him. And I think the comment with me was, I wish I'd had a front row with such a comfortable looking arse to push against like you. I think that was one of the comments that was made. And he said my job would have been a lot easier, he said. So I think that was, just as you say, he's happy to talk. He's happy to just invest in you and make you feel a little bit special. And he certainly did that for me.
Yeah, and that's the kind of, again, you hear the stories and you hear, rugby as a community that you hear how things were, and you hear about the nature of people, particularly internationals and guys who go into that kind of after dinner circuit sort of thing. And there's guys who've got reputations that not necessarily the best reputations. There's guys there's things about them that people who meet them find out and go, okay. But with Doddie, it was never the case. There was, it was that energy, that just being a real person and just having the time to share with everyone. He was someone who I think often, thought about how lucky he'd been to kind of play sport and had just enjoyed life, and it shone through in the stories you hear from people.
I think also, sorry, I cut you
off. No,
please,
no, you no, back in.
One of the things that, okay, Doddie was special, and we can't really, because I'm sure if you go and meet Rob Andrew or even, I don't know, I've met Finlay Calder before, and he was a lovely guy, but obviously Doddie was different. But what was the most, for me, one of the most endearing things is you just felt you could have a pint with him, and talk about farming or talk about, I mind the Howe of Fife. Yeah, I've played up there before, or I know about these guys, or whatever it was, you could have a pint with him, and that's, I guess that's a sort of a legacy of the being in the amateur game and then coming through into the professional game. Because don't get me wrong, all the modern day professionals seem to come across as decent guys, or women, but I'm taking the women out of there because the women because they're still dealing with the amateur side of things at the moment.
They tend to retain some of that, some of that accessibility, but they don't.
Doddie was never guarded with what he had to say, although you never really, I've never really heard of anyone turn around and say, oh yeah, he was at a dinner with us and he told some racist jokes, or he told some misogynistic jokes, etc. He don't get me wrong, he loved the ladies, and he loved to talk about the ladies and some of his stories, but it was always incredibly endearing. But what I was trying to put across is the fact that the new professionals are professionals, and they're coached, and they're controlled by the SRU, they're controlled by their clubs, etc. And you don't seem to get a chance to just stand and have a conversation and talk about the weather. Whereas Doddie Weir, even though he might be going on in 10 minutes to go on the telly or whatever, you could still have a nap about whatever. Yeah. And that was one of the most endearing things for me,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And moving on to, so in June of 2017, it came out in the news that Doddie had been diagnosed with MND. He had a fairly, like a lot of MND sufferers, he had a fairly limited prognosis. I think that's fair to say. Everyone's different, but you tend to have what the average person has tends to be fairly limited. And this coincided with setting up of the foundation, which has gone on to £8 million doesn't do it justice. Like, every one of us, probably everyone in the rugby community is aware of the Doddie Weir Foundation and the work it does, and we've been part of the Doddie Aid and all the different things that have happened, and it's incredible to think of how much work has went into that in such a short period of time, because obviously 6 years for that sort of impact, it's just incredible. Like, I was reflecting on it earlier on today, just trying to get my head around the concept of it, and it's just mind blowing what they've achieved.
Yeah, I think there's, for me, there's a couple of points to make. The first thing is that when Doddie's diagnosed, and he was diagnosed, and anybody with MND currently is diagnosed, there's no fight. It's how you live your life until you pass on.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing you can do about it now, apart from there's a drug on the market that extends your life a little bit and helps you live with it. But that's it. And I'm very lucky to be married to a rather wonderful woman who's involved with, in her small way, she helps people communicate using devices, and she does come across people with MND who lose their speech, etc., because of it, and it's there's nothing that can currently be done about it. So for me, I think it's more the reaction of the man, who then said, "Right, well, I've got a small amount of time left. What am I going to do?" And his only thought was to turn around and go, "I'm going to do everything I can to make anyone else who comes across this disease, whether it's a family member having to deal with someone being diagnosed or the person that's been diagnosed, make their life that little bit easier and eventually, hopefully, find a cure." And obviously, he got a lot longer than he thought he would ever get with the disease, and that is down to, I would say, I hope, this is absolutely my own thoughts, but I think it's down to the fact he kept busy and hammered on and had something to drive forward with. There's two ways of doing it: either feel bad and terrible, and you're quite welcome to do that, and it takes you quickly, or you power on and live as much of every day that comes to you is precious, and he seemed to do that, and just the work he's done and the foundation has done. The second part of what I was going to say was the fact that you're now in a position where if you see MND, a lot of people say, "My name's Doddie."
Yep.
And if you see a specific type of tartan, it's Doddie's tartan. And there's people out with the rugby community. There's people all over the world now who know all about Doddie Weir, and they may never have touched or seen a rugby ball in their life, but they know about Doddie Weir.
And it was really interesting during the campaigning and stuff. Where you've obviously got a couple of people. Obviously, the rugby community. We had Yus van der Westhuizen as well, who campaigned the J9 Foundation and set the blueprint in some ways for what people could do and what a campaign could look like, and generating huge amounts of money for research into disease. And actually, you're even seeing just today there's an announcement regarding Alzheimer's drugs and things like that, which all of this research is linked. And the more money that goes into these foundations, the more likely it is that you could maybe potentially see a cure for this disease. It was interesting thinking about during the campaigning and during Doddie's illness, guys like Rob Burrow as well. That spot, and seeing them together in the kind of BBC were quite good at getting the sports people together, and it's telling that you've got these high profile people who are putting themselves out there and the thing that struck me, and actually the Doddie appearance at Murrayfield against New Zealand, we've already said it was quite. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, let's be honest, and it was quite telling, shocking in some ways to see that decline. But I think for these guys, they should take so much pride in the fact they put themselves out there in that way. They didn't hide away. They didn't shy away from what this disease does to you. And I think that's incredibly powerful and like something that probably not get mentioned too much, but incredibly powerful and really, really important for people.
Yeah, I think, as you say, you know, there's two sides of it again, and then I keep going on about two sides, but yeah,
You're sitting on the fence tonight, Craig.
So yeah, no, I'm not sitting on the fence at all. I'm not sitting on the fence.
No,
I'm just, you've got people out there who can use their perceived fame. So we've got Doddie, we've got Kevin, we've got Rob Burrows. You've got now the guy Slater, who's now Ed Slater, who's used to play for Gloucester, and he's the latest person within the rugby community to announce he's been diagnosed with MND, and they use their fan base and their notoriety to help push the agenda of MND forward, and we can what we have to do is ensure we continue to do that. The other side of it, however, and I hope this does not get lost in the calls for a Doddie stand and a statue of Doddie outside Murrayfield and all of the other things that are going along with the fans, the Scotland fans, and also people around the world who have been touched by Doddie's story, is that there's people who aren't famous who are dying of this disease every day, and we need to ensure that the work keeps going. We still pick up the piece of tartan. We still go out and react to Doddie Aid emails and Doddie Aid calls for money, and we ensure that we keep going, because it's very good to start. We're all here to celebrate Doddie and say what he's made a disease that we all knew about, but we never really talked about because it's a death sentence. There's nothing you can do about it. And I think he's made us realise that, hang on a minute, there are people out there who are dying quite a horrendous death.
It is, yeah.
With no support. And they're basically given there's, as in Doddie's words, this is going to be your care nurse, and good luck to you. And we need to ensure that, I know the NHS is, you may, from your NHS side of things, there might be some more things in there that rather than that, but that was the words that he discussed.
And as someone in that position, he's absolutely right to call exactly as he's seen it. And the statistics in Scotland, so approximately 400 people at any point in time are living with MND. And just to kind of put context onto that statistic, 200 people are newly diagnosed every year. So it's about a 50%, rate that go within the year. So, you're right. It has flagged to people. Obviously, I think it's flagged to people. You see all the quality of life, and you've touched on it from your personal experience, Craig, through your wife. That the quality of life stuff that has to be more readily available and has to be available for everyone. 400 people within our country, every single one of them should get a quality of care that is equal and of the best quality they can get. And it shouldn't just be, here you go, you might want to think about getting your affairs in order. Here's a good lawyer for your will, and by the way, here's your nurse, and that's you. Yeah. Which you're absolutely right. It has been in the past, and your point about there being two sides to it. Yeah, it should absolutely be about making sure that quality of care and the dignity and everything that should be provided through that piece is done to the utmost absolute gold standard, whilst also looking at how do you research and help people. How do we avoid this? Is ultimately where we're at. So, it's been an incredible I think probably to summarise it, like every Scotland fan has got their Doddie story, and it's been incredible seeing the work that's been done. And you're right, we all need to, it didn't end Saturday. It's not going to end. People have to keep this memory alive and utilize this to continue to and do it for the right reason. The reason is, it's fighting this disease that exists and campaigning for it, and yeah, I think it is funny when you see the as you rightly say, the fans shouting for we should rename the stand and we should do this and we should do that. And I think in due time, the impact of what Doddie Weir's achieved over these 6 years and over his lifetime, over his 52 years, is incredible. And in due course, we would look back on that, and there rightly or wrongly might be calls for various accolades and various memorials. But for now, it's about continuing the work that's been done and continuing to support that. And I think that's probably the message I'll take away from all this. And maybe others will have their own views, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing with people who want to show.
No, not at all.
Show their grief in certain ways, and I would be quite happy to pay to pay the SRU's extortionate ticket prices to sit in the Doddie Weir stand. I don't have a problem with that at all, and I was only using it as an example.
Oh, I know, mate. I know.
The big thing for me is the fact that and I don't know what Doddie wants. He's not talking to me, and this, that, and the other. I'm never one of those people saying, "Oh, that's what Doddie would have wanted."
Yeah.
For me, though, the way I would like to remember him is to ensure that any time somebody puts something in front of me that's for MND, that I find whatever I've got in the pocket or whatever I've got in the bank account, and I put a little bit into it, and just to ensure that we can continue to research, or the researchers, the properly brainy people, can look into this disease and hopefully stop the suffering of the people who are dying of this disease, and also hopefully, fingers crossed, find a cure.
Yeah, so I think we've had Dougal's been with us throughout. They actually sent a comment in right at the start, but I think it probably summarises this section up really well. Dougie says, "I think we all thought he was immortal. Sadly not, but his wonderful, extraordinary spirit lives on. Lucky enough to have met him and shared a chat and a wee drink with him, and I'm sure many Scotland fans will be able to say shared a chat, shared a wee drink with him." And you've said yourself, Craig, you were able to share some time with him, and we'll all take that forward, and maybe it's a lesson for, as you rightly say, players today. The SRU will maybe come on to the SRU and answer the ruck out for you.
Let me think. Yeah.
Which one of the 4 different? Yeah, I mean, in a week where in a week where we've lost Doddie Weir, the SRU have done their best to do a hold my beer quite a few times. So we'll come on to that in Hands of the Ruck, but I think there's lessons to be learned from their side on that level of engagement. I guess for me, so I'm not going to name a player, right? But in the modern game, if a player was to have a situation that was similar, or to have some, God forbid, something happens and they find themselves in a position where they're walking out in front of a Murrayfield crowd to present a match ball against the All Blacks, having, been diagnosed with something or what have you, I would find it hard to think that the crowd would obviously be right behind them, but I just think that level of engagement and that crossover between amateur into professional, that accessibility that we've discussed throughout, fans really respond to that. And there's a lesson here. Rugby's meant to be a game. It's meant to be a game for people being able to watch your heroes down the park, having watched them all the way through the club game, and we're meant to have that connection to our players. And yes, it's professional, and yes, it's controlled, but there's an argument here that the SRU and others could really benefit from just letting those reins go a wee bit and letting people be people, because that's rugby. People tend to be, we actually can be quite decent, and people can be people, and it's okay.
Yeah, I think obviously there is the cesspit that is Twitter,
Is it still going? Has Musk shut it down yet? Are we prefacing this slightly?
Okay, yeah, maybe I'm behind the curve on that one.
It's at 21:47 on the 30th of November. Twitter is still active, right? So if you're listening back to this, and it's not, we were right at the time.
I'm really disappointed nobody has put up a parody account of me. I'm just ashamed. But
goes to Twitter.
I'm just thinking, but then again, I can pay for a blue tick now, so that's exciting.
I might parody and do a blue tick.
I can be somebody. No, but I think obviously our players need to be protected from the complete lunatics out there, or even just the people that just need to be told to shut up now and then.
It's no way to
sorry, I was. Funnily enough, it wasn't Cammy's face I had in my head. It was Johnny McGinty's, but that's no. I'm only saying that because he's not here.
The short sniffer.
We'll keep that for the patron. But I think just if you look at the players now in this current era, which player in the Scotland team who has shown his frailties, shown his ebullience, has shrugged off a little bit of the SRU tight gripper on him, and has shown that he's a man of the pie-eating public, is in that team and is one of the most loved players in Scotland.
Yeah.
And there's a direct, you can't just turn around and say, "Oh yeah, Finn has made that."
No,
that's just him being him. And if we had more not information, I suppose, if we just knew who these players were a little bit more, because we got a chance to speak to them, we got a chance to have them on podcasts, we got a chance to just, there's Murray McCallum came on the podcast. Oh. Everyone, what a nice guy, and someone who we all, when we found out he's playing for the Barbarians, we're all, mate, good on you, mate, and delighted for him. So all these little things, if they just loosened a little bit of their grip and let us know who they are a little bit more, then that's great. Protect them, fair enough. Protect them from the social media people out there. But anyway, that's
I think that's it's an absolutely reasonable thing to and yeah. So unfortunately, so the news came through on Saturday, and there was rugby on Saturday, and I was all ready for the. Obviously, I get tagged in quite a few things about the Edinburgh result and Benetton, and obviously at a time like this, rugby's not important, but ultimately there's URC points available, and the championship goes on. So Edinburgh were, I mean, they were poor at the weekend. There's no other word for it. But I mean, both Pro Clubs were poor, but there's a difference between being poor away to Leinster or poor away to Benetton. It's been described to me, Craig, as one of the worst Edinburgh performances of the last few years. Would you agree with that, or?
I'm still kind of reeling from it, and we've got a team that all of the Edinburgh fans, back to the hill, and absolutely, we didn't go out there short-handed. We had some players there that knew what they were doing and could play a good level of rugby. We've got some young lads who have been playing a lot of rugby, and not just for other teams, for Super Six, but also for Edinburgh. And there was nothing Edinburgh could do to get a hold of the game. It just ran away from them, and fair enough. Bennett, and we talk about this every time with Bennett and John. Whether it's Glasgow going out to Benetton or Edinburgh going out to Benetton, we always when we're at home, Benetton get a spanking.
Yep.
Did you get beat at home? No, I don't think you got beat.
Oh no, we beat them to 0, mate.
Aye, so Benetton don't travel very well, but I'll tell you what, when they're at home, they're a dangerous team. And so, I'm not going to agree with you to say that it was the poorest performance I've seen Edinburgh play, because I have been in Murrayfield with 2,000 of my friends, and seen some awful games. But I'm still quite shocked at how we just did not get a hold of that game at all. Nothing went wrong.
Nothing went wrong. Nothing went wrong, and it all went wrong.
Yeah,
I think people were meaning, like, in the last few years, it was probably the worst they'd seen Edinburgh in the last few years. And I mean, I watched the game back, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's a frustrating one for the coaching team, but a frustrating one for the players as well, because there was a lot of experienced players on that pitch, and probably from the Benetton side there was less experience. There was a couple of big names in there, but really they had a bit of a scratch team out, so it will be a frustrating one. And I think the point I've always made about Benetton, like, we've all heard me say, they're a Doddie team, they're this, they're that, right? See, I think away from home, they absolutely, they are the Benetton of old away from home. At their home ground, I agree with you completely. They are a dangerous side. I think the point I've always tried to make, though, is they're a dangerous side, but they're beatable. And if you're serious as a club, and I've probably accepted where Glasgow actually are as a club with regards to this, but if you're serious as a club of challenging top 4 or getting to the latter stages of this tournament, they're a team you need to be beating away from home. They're a team you need to be putting away. And both Edinburgh and Glasgow have been really close to doing that as well. Glasgow less so. We got absolutely pummeled at the start of the season, having not had a pre-season, frankly. So, that it does change the picture a wee bit. And both like last season, both Edinburgh and Glasgow were a kick away from beating Benetton away. So I mean, I stick by this. They get results, right? But I stick by that. If you're serious as a team of challenging at the top, winning this tournament, I don't think you win this tournament if you don't dispatch Benetton away from home. I think you have to be putting them away.
And this is the big problem I have. Is the biggest problem I have is I totally bloody agree with you. It's we gave a team that we should be beaten every time we get a hold of them. Now, I know that sounds entitled, and we should be beating them. Of course, we should.
You've heard me say that a number of times.
Okay, but this is a team that are building. Benetton are building, and they've got some great players have come in to play for them now. And they've even got Jacob Amanga came over and came off the bench.
Yeah.
So they've got some great players coming through. But again, I've been very bullish on here, saying that I'm expecting them to be top 4. I'm expecting, the way Edinburgh have been going. But we cannot have a season where, 1 minute we're playing against Cardiff at home and we're beating them well away, in the shadow of the Principality. And I'm not talking about, it's Cardiff. Of course you're going to beat them. No, Cardiff are a serious side this year.
They're a good side, yeah.
And then we go away out to Benetton, and we lose But we don't just lose; we lose against 14 men. They were they were down to 14 men for some period of time. In fact, did they not go down to 13 men at some point?
They might well have done.
It may just So penalties were an issue. We're giving away penalties. Our attack seemed toothless. It seemed to go to the point again. It was certain members of the team decided that they were going to do the job for everybody, and unfortunately that just didn't help. We had issues with even Christine. I've been singing Christine's praises on the pod. He goes back to, it's almost like he'd had a hard reset. They switched him on and off again.
Did he start talking Spanish?
Yeah. and he's back into crash ball, taking him out of contact. And then, for me again, it was this whole thing of we took it one phase too far every time. We'd play it, and then cough the ball up. Or have a penalty, they would come in and jack it. One thing I would say about Benetton, they sat back and then chose a moment to come in and jackal.
Their breakdown work was really strong. And that's the thing. Edinburgh will face that because Edinburgh's back row has obviously been identified by. It hardly takes a keen rugby mind to go, that Edinburgh back row's a bit of all right. Let's really work on what our timing, how we're going to attack the jackal. We can't go after every ball. Let's really pick our moments. And I think Edinburgh, what they done really badly was they isolated themselves through that. That selfish attitude of, ball carry, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to beat three men and smash people out the road. And all they did was drag themselves into a position where and done penalty. Yeah, what's to work on? And I think Edinburgh will be quite glad in some ways to get to the European fixtures and get a wee break from the URC. Obviously, they've had the break for the autumn internationals, but I think they'll be quite glad just to move away and just try something a wee bit different, because I think that will have hurt their confidence big time.
Well, I think more the fact of it would have hurt their it's hurt the guys we need to have in the background within the team when the superstars are not there in the Six Nations. It's hurt their confidence, because I can guarantee you this weekend on Friday we'll have some of the superstars starting to drip back into the team for the Munster game, and you'll see a different Edinburgh because A, we're at home at the Dam, and B, we've got the Schumann and all of that have been training this week. So those guys will come in off a half decent Scotland performance over the autumn period, and they'll be let's get on with it, with the wounded animal that is Munster, and then what I'm more worried about is next time the big names go away, what's happening.
And the Six Nations period will be crucial, even though again it's that situation where there shouldn't be any clashing rugby around the URC. There shouldn't be any fixtures. We are going to find ourselves in a position where the players before and afterwards get those rest periods, and it will be really like those two fixtures either side of the Six Nations window will be absolutely crucial for both Glasgow and Edinburgh. Coming on to my Ouija brethren, we headed off to Dublin, and you know what? It finished 40 points to 5, and at one point again, it felt a lot closer. Like there was a couple of mistakes. Glasgow are away from home. Glasgow are peak able to take the revolver, spin it round, and gob themselves in the big toe right now. They are very good at that. Leinster were refereed like Leinster are often refereed at the RDS. And there was a couple of incidents that you're kind of like, all right, cool. But ultimately, Glasgow were, if we're going to be, right, let's be positive for a second. We've went from 70 points to 40 points. Which is huge progress, Craig.
that's just, I absolutely love your enthusiasm to grab that victory from that defeat from victory there. That was.
I am not thinking anyone's suggesting that's a victory.
That was fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, again, Glasgow had a relatively experienced team out there, a couple of young boys, but really they had a good side out, and Leinster had a fairly young team as always, and they still absolutely demolished them. And the game was competitive to a certain extent, but again, just mistakes. And I think it really, for me, the games against Leinster don't show you where you're at as a team, like at this point in your development as a side. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting when Edinburgh come up against Leinster to see how competitive they are.
Yeah.
I think it is genuinely the games against Benetton, the games against, I'd probably say Leinster and South African teams. You can probably extract them out a wee bit, maybe Ulster as well. It's the games against the Italian, the Welsh sides, how well you put away those Welsh sides at home, how competitive you are away from home against those teams that are in that bubble. Probably there's about 8 clubs in a bubble that are quite similar in stature. And I think that's where we are, like certainly from Glasgow's perspective. And I've been quite vocal. I don't see us as a playoff team this year. And we're playing very well at home, and we're continuing to play very well at home, but I don't see us as a playoff team because I think our away form, I'm struggling to see where a win away from home comes from, and hopefully it'll be Zebre. We probably have to beat them away from home, but it's a huge challenge at the moment for that Glasgow team, and
it really is. And first things first, please forgive me, Glasgow fans, because I didn't watch the game, and I really applaud you, John, because you went and watched not only the Edinburgh game once, but you watched it back for a second time, which I didn't do. I watched it once and then tried to banish it from my mind. So thanks for the PTSD. I appreciate it.
It was nice for my soul just to watch it back. You know what I'm like.
Yeah. And I am sitting here, and I am sitting here humbled and shocked because I really. I honestly thought we would go out there with the team that we had. Okay, fair enough. Henry Burgos was at 9, and I thought, well, but we've got other players around him that should do a good job. And unfortunately, we didn't do that. I think what's my original point was going to be what's disappointing, and what is difficult is I would regularly watch every Scottish game. So I would watch Glasgow play.
Yeah.
I enjoy watching Glasgow play. Maybe not as much as Glasgow fans, but I enjoy watching Glasgow play. That's because I'm trying to see if they will get beat. No, that's a different story. No, I enjoy watching Glasgow play because, and obviously now I should really be watching Glasgow play because I'm being asked to talk about it on here. But what's disappointing is that you know that what the score's going to be when you're saying, right, Glasgow are going to Leinster away.
Yeah. And
currently, now this might just be because I'm an Edinburgh fan, but I don't know what that score's going to be when it comes to Edinburgh Leinster. I think it might be, I'm just saying it that Edinburgh, you never know.
Yeah, I think it will be closer. It'll be closer than the Glasgow game at the weekend. I think Edinburgh will be more competitive away from home.
And what I'm more concerned about for Glasgow and Scotland's rugby as a whole is, we've got a few players within Glasgow that we've talked about before that are, I know we've got to be serious here because it's people's jobs and livelihoods, but it's time that they moved on. We've got underused players within Glasgow who are looking like they're starting to be used a little bit more now.
Yep.
And I think it'll be, I very much do hope that we're going to get back to a situation where Glasgow, we're going into a game to watch Glasgow play and not expect a score. This is, this is going to be an interesting game to watch. And unfortunately, but then again, next year you never know, because Leinster won't have Lancaster, so you just don't know how that's going to affect them.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things at play, isn't there? I just the final point in the Glasgow game, before we wrap up the free view, you're getting your money worth out it. Well, your money, your free money. You're getting your free content tonight, boys and girls. Come and pay your money and head over to Patreon with us, and we'll give you a good time. That sounds weird.
Yep, that's definitely not what I was expecting about Patreon.
The absolute standout on the Leinster Glasgow game, the absolute standout player on both sides, Sebastian Cancellieri, is having an absolute season to behold. And I know you guys are slightly different players, because obviously Buffelli is a goal kicker, and he is, he's a wonderful attacking player, great defender. He's a very complete player. Cancellieri is an old school winger, and he is tearing it up. And he was top of a lot of the stats at the weekend, despite Glasgow taking a 40 pointer. He's top of all the stats, and he just looks so good at the moment. And I'm very excited to see him kick on. He's a top player, and I was really pleased. And he really looks a bit gormless as well, which is great. Like I love a winger that's got his socks around his ankles and just kind of looks a bit confused as to where he is, but then he cuts an amazing line, skins 3 bodies, and heads under the posts. Yes,
you're reminding me of talking about a certain Canadian, a certain DTH. Was he not a little bit like that?
A wee bit. Cancellieri does have a bit. He has a bit of the DTH about him. Probably a bit more flamboyant than DTH, but he's definitely.
DTH liked the socks around the ankles. That's for sure.
He did. So well, they all did at one point, didn't they? Tommy Zoom, he was a socks around the sneaks. He loved it. Loved his socks low as well. Yeah.
So does Maitland. I think Maitland's the same as well.
Maitland did as well, yeah. Maybe it's a Glasgow thing. Maybe you have to, if you're playing wing for Glasgow, you have to have your socks around your ankles if you're top quality. It's like, in football, like you always talked about guys that wear a certain colour of boots, and you're like, you're going to have to be good. If you're going to wear those boots, you're going to have to be good. It's maybe that with wingers and socks. Maybe you have to be really good to put your socks down on your ankles.
We see a lot of the props didn't roll their socks up, but that's mainly because they can't get the socks over the calves. I was going to say, don't get the agility to quite get down there. Hey, no, listen. There's just because WP Nell has the power belly, it's an advantage at certain points of the time. It keeps his knees off the floor when he's scrummaging really low.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yes, that's what we'll call it. So that's the URC. We are very over time. I will cut very quickly to one other piece of news, Craig. The John Cooney saga is not going away. Should John Cooney play for Scotland next year? Yes, no?
Oh, God. Let's bring him over to one of the 2 clubs first and see how he gets on first here.
Fair enough. That's a very pragmatic...
And by the way, we'll take him.
A very pragmatic and diplomatic answer, followed by some one-eyed patriotism. Oh, love it. Absolutely. So that has been us for tonight. Let us head on over to the Patreon. Thank you everyone who's joined us and helped us tonight. Just have a wee chat about Doddie Weir's life and celebrate some of the happy moments that he has brought to us all over the years, and he will be sorely missed, of course, but his legacy will live on through every single action we take from now on. So, but we'll move over to Patreon now. So for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Craig.
Bye.